Relief, and today I'll be speaking to you from Memphis, Tennessee, or as we lovingly call it, Flop City. Hope your Ramadan is going well so far. May Allah accept all of our fasts from us. Today we'll be talking about pregnancy and breastfeeding and Ramadan fasting. I think the first thing we need to understand is what is Islam's view on women who are pregnant and breastfeeding fasting during the month of Ramadan. So, since I'm not a scholar, I decided to reach out to one of our local imams here in Memphis, Imam Yasser Pasaka, and he was kind enough to share his thoughts on this. So, let's hear what he has to say.
Assalamu alaikum. Islam gives both women who are pregnant or breastfeeding the choice, depending whether they believe that they can handle it or not. They can either fast or choose not to fast. If the pregnancy is a multiple pregnancy, like if a woman is pregnant this year and breastfeeding this year and then pregnant again and breastfeeding again, that becomes what we call multiple pregnancies. And at that point, a woman is asked only to pay the atonement, kafara, for the days that she has missed. However, if the pregnancies are too far apart, every 3 years she's getting pregnant, then some people believe that she has enough time to make up for the days that she missed. So if a woman is pregnant, breastfeeding, and believes that she can fast without bringing harm to herself or to her baby, then she is allowed to fast if she chooses to do so. I also remember that there are multiple opinions in Islamic jurisprudence. So there is an opinion that actually says that she has to make up the days that she missed and also pay the atonement. Another opinion says she just has to atone, pay the kafara for missing. Another opinion says she has the choice depending on her ability. Allah knows best. The most important part, though, is your health and the health of your baby.
Now that we understand the Islamic perspective, I think it's really important to also understand from a medical perspective when it would be considered safe for us to undertake fasting versus when, it would be not advised. And so, in terms of criteria, I did touch base with our local OBGYN, Amina. In terms of pregnancy, here are some green lights for you. If you start your pregnancy at a healthy weight and your nutritional status is adequate, as well as if you have had easy pregnancy so far and you are considered a low or normal risk, then considering fasting during pregnancy is going to be good. In terms of yellow or caution, uh, if you are carrying multiple babies, so if you're having twins, for example, that would be a yellow light, as well as if, for example, you're diagnosed with gestational diabetes, however, it is complicated gestational diabetes where you aren't prescribed medication or insulin, for example. So, what about red light? What are factors that would disqualify us from, say, fasting while we're pregnant? If you were starting off your pregnancy as high risk, if you didn't start with a good nutritional status, if you're having a difficult pregnancy, if you are extremely nauseous, if you have poor intake in general, all of those things are going to be disqualifiers for you for fasting during. There has been quite a bit of research that's been done on pregnancy, and most of it shows that if you're starting out pretty healthy and you have a pretty normal pregnancy, there's really no difference between women who fasted or didn't fast in terms of outcomes for their babies. Let's look at some nutrition considerations for pregnancy. When you're pregnant, if you're in your first trimester, from a caloric perspective and a protein intake perspective, your first trimester doesn't require a lot of additional nutrition. In fact, the recommendation is really to stick to what you're eating, or you can increase your intake by about 100, 120, 150 calories, which is like the equivalent of 1 to 2 pieces of fruit. When you get to your second trimester, you do require a little bit more intake. And so you are required to take an additional about 350 calories, which is an addition of maybe a small meal that includes about 3 to 4 servings of the different food groups. Similarly, if you're in your third trimester, you're going to have a need for about 450 additional calories, which would look like an additional small meal with those 3 or 4 servings of the different food groups, as well as an additional small snack, like maybe some fruit with some dairy or something like that. In terms of protein requirements, you will need about an additional 21 grams or so of additional protein in your second and third trimesters, which is about an additional serving of meat alternatives, so about 3 ounces extra. In terms of additional nutrients, we want to have more folic acid, which we're going to find in our leafy green vegetables, our fortified cereals, as well as our citrus fruit. We're also going to want to increase our calcium intake, which we'll find in our dairy foods, as well as our broccoli and kale. And we'll also want to increase our iron intake, which we'll find in our lean meats, our poultry, and our fish, as well as vitamin D, which we'll also find in fatty fish, as well as fortified dairy products. We also want to increase our fluid intake during pregnancy so that we are consuming at least 10 8-ounce cups of water throughout the day. Now that we know what the nutritional requirements are for pregnancy, we just need to make sure that we are getting all that in during the time that we are able to eat and drink between the star and silver. So making sure that you're well hydrated, making sure that you're getting that additional meal in or snack in, making sure that you are choosing healthy choices for your meals. All of that is going to be very helpful. While you're pregnant, you are recommended to supplement with a prenatal multivitamin as well. So it will be important for you to continue to take that. If you do decide to fast based on the criteria we just covered, it is important for you to also make sure that you aren't pushing yourself too hard. Here are some key signs that you need to keep in mind if you are fasting and pregnant. If you, for example, feel lightheaded or dizzy, if you're feeling really tired, if you're feeling nauseous, these are all things that might indicate that you really need to break your fast. Even if, sometimes we'll, try and push through because we're almost to the end of our fast. If you feel any of those symptoms, it's really important for you to break your fast at that time and to make sure that you eat, hydrate yourself well. If after 30 minutes you're still not feeling good, you should definitely contact your healthcare provider and make sure that everything is okay. But what are some things to consider if you are thinking about fasting while you're breastfeeding? Here are some of our green lights. If you have had a pretty good experience with breastfeeding, you have good milk production, your baby's doing well, you and your baby don't have any issues with breastfeeding, those are all good indicators that you might be okay to undertake fasting. What about some yellow lights? Well, the main yellow light that you want to keep in mind if you are breastfeeding is how old your baby is and how far along they are in their journey with you in terms of breastfeeding. If they are still solely breastfeeding and they don't supplement with any formula, or if they're not at the age yet to introduce some other foods, that would definitely be a yellow light for you in terms of just making sure that it's the right decision for you and your baby. What are some red lights? If you're not having very good milk production, even far off the bottom, I would definitely be a red light. If you're having issues with baby and you in terms of breastfeeding, that would be a red light. If your baby was a low birth weight, that would also be a red light. Of course, always, always, always check with your doctor or you undertake fasting and make sure that they are okay with you. From a nutrition perspective, for breastfeeding moms, what are your nutrition requirements? You do need an additional 350 to 450 calories, which is similar to pregnancy in the second and third trimester. So you will want to also have that additional meal and snack. In terms of protein, you're also going to want to have that additional serving of 3 ounces of protein. You'll also need an additional 12 8-ounce cups of water so that you're able to produce adequate breast milk. In terms of specific nutrients to keep in mind, we still want to make sure that we're getting adequate iron and calcium, as well as we want to make sure that we're getting additional iodine from our diet, we'll find additional iodine in dairy, eggs, seafood, and of course our iodized salt. We also want to increase our choline intake. And again, we're going to find those in our dairy, eggs, meats, and beans and lentils. So again, we want to make sure that we're meeting all of those nutritional needs during the time between our. And so far, we're getting enough, plenty of fluids. Specifically, we want to make sure that we're getting 3 to 4 servings of our milk and alternatives. Drinking lots of milk is going to be good for you. There are certain nutrients, for example, fennel can be very good for milk production. And so there is you can get mother's milk tea, which can be helpful having at hours or having a couple of cups during the time that you are fasting can be helpful as well to just ensure that you're getting enough milk production. Now that you know what you need to consider before you decide whether or not you want to fast, while you're breastfeeding, here are some key symptoms or signs that you should watch for that would indicate that you should stop fasting. In terms of mom, if you feel dizzy, if you feel dehydrated, if your urine is extremely dark, if you're feeling overly tired, and it's important to stop fasting, make sure that you get adequate hydration, drink a glass of juice or some coconut water. And if after 30 minutes you're still not feeling well, you do want to contact your healthcare provider, just make sure that some key signs to keep in mind that might indicate that you should stop fasting because your baby may not be getting enough nutrition from your breast milk are, for example, if you notice that your baby is crying a lot more because they're hungry, if you notice that they're producing less milk diapers, or if they're starting to get like a greenish stool, all of those are indicators that maybe they're not getting enough nutrition from the breast milk that you are able to produce. And so those would be indicators that you should stop fasting. I hope you found this presentation informative. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me. Here is my contact information.